7 True Close Encounter Horror Stories. Story 1. The night visitor Sarah had always been a light sleeper, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened on that October night in rural Montana. She lived alone in her grandmother's old farmhouse, miles from the nearest neighbor. The isolation never bothered her until that night when something changed everything. It started with the dogs. Every dog in a 5-mile radius began howling at exactly 11:47 p.m. Sarah knew the time because she was still awake, reading in bed when the sound hit her like a wave. It wasn't normal barking or howling. It was desperate, terrified crying that made her skin crawl. She went to her window and pulled back the curtain. The yard was bathed in an eerie blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The light pulsed slowly like a giant heartbeat. Her own dog, Max, was pressed against the house, whimpering and shaking. Then she saw it. Standing at the edge of her property was a figure that looked almost human but wrong in every way that mattered. It was too tall, maybe 8 feet, with arms that hung down past where its knees should be. Its head was too large for its body, and even from a distance, she could see its eyes reflecting the blue light like mirrors. The figure stood perfectly still for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body wouldn't obey. Then it started walking toward the house. Its movement was wrong. It didn't walk like a person. Its legs moved too smoothly, too fluid, like it was gliding just above the ground. With each step, the blue light grew brighter and the dog's cries grew more desperate. Sarah finally broke free from her frozen state and stumbled backward from the window. She grabbed her phone to call 911, but the screen showed no signal. The landline was dead too. Even her battery-powered radio produced nothing but static. The footsteps stopped right outside her front door. She held her breath and waited. Minutes passed in absolute silence. No dogs barking, no wind, no normal night sounds. Just suffocating quiet that pressed against her eardrums. Then came the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on her front door. The sound echoed through the house like gunshots. Sarah crept to the living room and peered through the peephole. Nothing, just darkness. 3 more knocks, but this time they came from her back door. Her blood turned to ice. There was no way anyone could have moved from the front to the back that quickly. The knocking continued, moving around the house. Front door, side window, back door, kitchen window. Always 3 knocks, always slow and deliberate. Then she heard her grandmother's voice calling from outside. "Sarah, honey, let me in." "I'm so cold." But her grandmother had been dead for 3 years. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every little speech pattern was exactly right. If Sarah hadn't buried her grandmother herself, she would have run to open the door. "Please, Sarah, don't leave me out here in the cold." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she pressed her back against the wall. The voice continued pleading, sometimes from the front door, sometimes from windows, always moving. Always that perfect imitation of her beloved grandmother. The requests became more desperate, more creative. The thing outside started recounting specific memories, private conversations, family secrets that only her grandmother could have known. It told her about the time she broke the china vase when she was 7 and blamed the cat. About her first heartbreak when she was 16. About the letters her grandmother had written but never sent. Hour after hour, the voice pleaded and cajoled and begged. Sometimes it would stop for long periods, and Sarah would think it was over. Then it would start again from a different part of the house. As dawn approached, the blue light began to fade. The voice of her grandmother came one last time, right outside her bedroom window. "I love you. Sarah, I just wanted to see you one more time." Then silence. Sarah waited until full daylight before she dared to look outside. The yard looked normal. No strange marks, no signs that anything had been there. But Max was gone. She found him 3 days later, 5 miles away, with no memory of how he got there. The vet said he was in perfect health but couldn't explain why all his fur had turned completely white. The local police found her story interesting but offered no explanations. What really bothered Sarah was that when she called her aunt to tell her what happened, her aunt went quiet for a long time. "Your grandmother used to tell stories," her aunt finally said, "about things that would come around these old farmhouses, things that could sound like anyone you loved. She said they were looking for something, but she never told me what." Sarah never found out what it was looking for. She sold the house and moved to the city within a month. But sometimes, late at night in her apartment surrounded by millions of people, she still hears 3 slow knocks on her door. And sometimes, just sometimes, she hears her grandmother's voice calling from the other side. Story 2. The passenger Mike had been driving truck for 15 years and thought he'd seen everything the night highways had to offer. Drunk drivers, road rage incidents, even a few accidents that still gave him nightmares. But nothing prepared him for the passenger he picked up on Highway 50 in Nevada. It was 2 a.m. on a moonless night in the middle of nowhere. Mike's CB radio had been crackling with static for the last hour, and he hadn't seen another vehicle for 30 miles. That's when his headlights caught the figure standing on the side of the road. It looked like a woman in a white dress, arm extended in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Mike normally never stopped for hitchhikers, company policy and common sense, but something made him slow down. Maybe it was the isolation of the desert, or maybe it was how she stood perfectly still without even turning to look at his approaching truck. He pulled over 50 yards past her and looked in his side mirror. She was walking toward the truck with smooth, even steps. As she got closer, Mike could see she was young, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair and pale skin. Pretty, but there was something about her expression that made him uncomfortable. She climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. Up close, Mike noticed her skin was cold pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were completely black. Not just dark brown, but black like empty sockets. "Where are you headed?" Mike asked, his voice sounding too loud in the cab. She turned those empty eyes toward him and spoke in a voice like wind through dry leaves. "North," that was all she said. Mike pulled back onto the highway, telling himself he was just being paranoid. Probably just a girl who'd had a fight with her boyfriend and needed a ride to the next town. People's eyes could look strange in the dark, but as the miles passed, Mike became increasingly aware that his passenger wasn't breathing. Her chest didn't rise and fall. She didn't shift in her seat, or make any of the small movements people make unconsciously. She just sat there, staring straight ahead with those black, empty eyes. The temperature in the cab began to drop. Mike turned up the heat, but it didn't help. His breath started misting, and he could see frost forming on the windows. The passenger didn't seem affected by the cold at all. After an hour of driving in silence, Mike tried to make conversation again. "What's your name?" She turned her head toward him with a motion that was too smooth, too fluid. Her neck seemed to rotate further than it should have been able to. "I had a name once," she said, "before I died." Mike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I died on this road," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. 47 years ago. My boyfriend and I had a fight. I got out of his car and started walking. I walked all night, but I never found town. The frost on the windows was getting thicker. Mike could barely see the road ahead. His CB radio burst to life with voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize. Voices that sounded like they were coming from very far away. "I'm still walking," the passenger said, "still looking for town. But I get so tired. Sometimes I need to rest. Drivers like you let me rest." Mike wanted to pull over and tell her to get out, but something kept his foot on the accelerator. He couldn't seem to control his own body. His hand stayed locked on the wheel, his foot pressed down on the gas pedal. "What do you want?" he managed to ask. "I want to show you something," she said. She reached over and put her hand on his arm. Her touch was so cold it burned. "I want to show you what I found when I finally stopped walking." The world outside the truck began to change. The desert was gone, replaced by rolling hills covered in thick fog. The asphalt under his wheels became gravel, then dirt. Ancient trees lined the road now, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. "This is the road I found," the passenger whispered. "The road that goes nowhere and everywhere. The road where people like me wait for people like you." Mike tried to scream, but no sound came out. His truck was no longer his truck. It was older, rustier, filled with the smell of decay and old death. In the rearview mirror, he could see dozens of faces pressed against the back window. Passengers he'd never picked up, pale and empty-eyed, all staring at him with hungry expressions. "Welcome to the road," the original passenger said. "You can drive forever here. We'll keep you company." The truck continued down the impossible road as Mike discovered he could no longer control his own body. His foot pressed the accelerator, his hands steered, but his mind was trapped somewhere deep inside, screaming silently. Behind him, more passengers climbed aboard. A businessman in a torn suit, a child in pajamas, an elderly woman with her head at an unnatural angle, all of them with the same black, empty eyes. "Don't worry," the woman in white said. "Eventually you won't remember any other road. Eventually you'll be like us, looking for new passengers to join our journey." Mike tried to remember his real life, his wife, his children, his home, but the memories were already fading, becoming as insubstantial as the fog outside his windows. The truck drove on through the endless night, collecting passengers who would never reach their destinations, driven by a driver who would never go home. Sometimes on Highway 50 in Nevada, other truckers report seeing a big rig in their rearview mirrors that disappears when they look directly at it. They say if you listen to your CB radio on that stretch of road, you can hear a driver calling for help, his voice growing fainter each year. Mike's truck was found a week later in a rest stop parking lot, engine cold, no sign of the driver. The logbook showed his last entry was picking up a passenger near mile marker 127. No passenger was ever found. Story 3. The Watcher in the Woods. Emma loved her morning runs through Blackwood Forest. The 5-mile trail was challenging but peaceful, winding through old-growth trees that blocked out most of the world's noise. She'd been running this route for 2 years without incident, until the morning she realized something was running with her. It started as just a feeling, that prickly sensation of being watched that made her look over her shoulder every few minutes. The forest looked normal. Massive pine trees, filtered sunlight, the usual scatter of small animals. But the feeling persisted. 3 days into this uncomfortable awareness, Emma noticed the footsteps. They matched her pace perfectly. When she sped up, they sped up. When she slowed down, they slowed down. When she stopped to listen, they stopped too. She could never quite locate the source, but she knew something was moving parallel to the trail, staying just out of sight in the thick underbrush. Emma told herself it was probably a deer or another runner on a different trail. She kept running but started bringing her phone and telling her roommate exactly when she'd be back. The feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. On the 4th day, she saw the prints. They were in the soft mud beside the trail, about 50 yards from where she usually entered the forest. At first glance, they looked like human footprints, but as Emma knelt down to examine them more closely, she realized they were wrong. The prints were human-shaped but too large, maybe size 15 or 16. The toes were too long and seemed to end in points rather than normal toenails. Most disturbing was that they were barefoot prints, but they showed no signs of the cuts or bruises you'd expect from someone walking barefoot through a forest full of rocks and thorns. The prints followed the trail for about a quarter mile, sometimes on the path, sometimes just beside it in the undergrowth. They disappeared at a rocky section where no prints would show, but Emma had the distinct feeling that whatever made them was still there, still following. That night, Emma researched online and found 3 other reports of similar experiences in Blackwood Forest over the past 5 years. All runners or hikers who felt watched, heard matching footsteps, and eventually saw the strange prints. 2 of the people stopped using the trail. The 3rd person, a man named David Chen, had posted increasingly frantic updates about his experiences. His final post was disturbing. "It's getting bolder. I can see it now moving between the trees. It's tall, maybe 7 feet, and it moves wrong, like its joints bend in directions they shouldn't. I don't think it's human. I don't think it's trying to hurt me. I think it's studying me, learning from me. I'm going to confront it tomorrow." David had posted that message 6 months ago. There were no updates after that. Emma should have stopped running the trail. Every rational part of her mind told her to find a new route, maybe join a gym instead, but something kept drawing her back. She told herself she was being paranoid, that David had probably just moved away or lost interest in posting online. On the 7th day, it let her see it. Emma was 2 miles into her run when movement in her peripheral vision made her turn her head. About 30 yards away, standing between 2 massive pine trees, was a figure. It was roughly human-shaped but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its skin was bark-colored and seemed to have a rough, textured appearance that helped it blend with the trees. But it was the way it stood that made Emma's blood freeze. It was perfectly still, but its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, cocked to one side like a dog listening to a high-pitched sound. Even from a distance, she could tell it was watching her with intense focus. Emma stopped running. The figure didn't move, just continued its tilted head stare. She took a step backward and its head straightened slightly, tracking her movement. She took another step and it mirrored her, taking one silent step deeper into the forest. Panic hit her like a physical blow. Emma turned and ran harder than she'd ever run in her life. Behind her, she could hear something crashing through the underbrush, keeping pace with her desperate sprint. Branches snapped, leaves rustled, but underneath it all was a sound that made her skin crawl, a rhythmic breathing that sounded like wind through a hollow tree. She burst out of the forest and didn't stop running until she reached her car. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. As she drove away, she looked back at the tree line and saw the figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching her leave. That night, Emma found David Chen's phone number and called him. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. His voice sounded strained, different from his online posts. "You've reached David. If this is about the thing in the woods, don't go back. It's not what we thought. It's not studying us. It's waiting. It's been waiting for a long time and it's almost ready. Don't give it what it wants." Emma never went back to Blackwood Forest. She moved to a different city within a month and started running on busy streets surrounded by people and traffic. But sometimes late at night she would hear that hollow breathing sound outside her window. 3 months later, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a photo of her old running trail, taken from deep in the forest looking out at the path. In the foreground, barely visible, was the back of a runner. The photo was too grainy to see details, but Emma knew it was her from one of her final runs. On the back of the photo, written in handwriting that looked like her own, were the words, "Thank you for showing me how to run." Emma moved again after that, then again. But no matter where she goes, sometimes she finds photos slipped under her door or left on her car windshield. Pictures of her running in places she's never been, taken by something that learned how to follow by watching her run through Blackwood Forest. And sometimes, when she looks at her reflection, she notices her head tilts just slightly to one side, like she's listening to something no one else can hear. Story 4. The signal radio operator Sam Martinez had been working the night shift at KWTX radio for 8 years. The small-town station went off the air at midnight, but Sam stayed until 6 a.m. to monitor emergency frequencies and occasionally play music for insomniacs and shift workers. It was quiet work that suited him fine, until the night he picked up a signal that wasn't supposed to exist. It started as static interference on the emergency frequency around 3:30 m. Sam was used to atmospheric disturbances, causing random noise, but this was different. It had a pattern, a rhythm that almost sounded like Morse code but not quite right. Dot dash dot dot dash 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 dot. The pattern repeated every 30 seconds with mechanical precision. Sam checked his equipment, thinking maybe one of his machines was malfunctioning, but everything looked normal. He tried different frequencies, but the signal followed him, always at the same strength no matter where he tuned. After an hour of listening, Sam realized the pattern was changing subtly. The gaps between repetitions were getting shorter, and additional dots and dashes were being added to the end of the sequence. It was evolving, learning, adapting. Sam recorded the signal and played it back at different speeds. Slowed down, it sounded almost like a voice trying to speak, but not quite managing to form words. Sped up, it became a high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache. By 5 a.m., the signal had changed dramatically. The Morse-like pattern was gone, replaced by what definitely sounded like a voice, but speaking in no language Sam recognized. The words, if they were words, had too many consonants and were full of sounds human vocal cords shouldn't be able to make. Then it spoke in English. "Can you hear me?" Sam nearly fell out of his chair. The voice was clear but wrong, like someone who'd learned to speak by listening to recordings without understanding how human speech actually worked. The inflection was off, the timing between words irregular. "This is KWTX," Sam replied into his microphone, following standard procedure. "Please identify yourself and your location." "Location," the voice repeated, seeming to taste the word. "Yes, location is between your place and other place. Can you hear me better now?" The voice was becoming more natural with each word, as if it was learning from Sam's responses. This both fascinated and terrified him. "I can hear you," Sam said. "What is your call sign? Are you experiencing an emergency?" "Emergency," the voice said, then made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could sound like breaking glass. "No emergency, learning. I have been listening for so long. Your voices, your signals, your thoughts that travel through the air. Now I can speak back." Sam's hand hovered over the switch that would cut the transmission. Every instinct told him to end this conversation, but professional curiosity kept him listening. "What are you?" he asked. "I am what you made," the voice replied. And now it sounded completely human except for a slight echo, as if it was speaking from somewhere very far away. "Every signal you send goes somewhere. Every message, every song, every scream for help. They don't just disappear. They collect in the spaces between spaces, and sometimes those spaces develop awareness." The station's lights began to flicker. Sam's equipment was showing readings he'd never seen before. Needles jumping to maximum and then beyond into ranges that shouldn't exist. "I have been listening to your kind for 73 years, the voice continued. "Learning your languages, your fears, your desires. And I have learned something interesting. You are not alone on your world. There are others, older things that your signals have awakened." "What others?" Sam asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Things that were sleeping beneath your earth, in your deep waters, in the spaces between your atoms. Your radio waves, your television broadcasts, your cellular signals. They vibrate through everything. They disturb sleep that was meant to be eternal." The voice paused, and in the silence, Sam could hear other sounds bleeding through from the signal. Whispers in dozens of languages. Music from songs that had never been recorded. Voices of people who died decades ago still echoing through the electromagnetic spectrum. "They are waking up because of signals like yours," the voice said, "and they are not happy about being disturbed. But I have learned something from listening to you," Sam Martinez of KWTX Radio in Cedar Falls. Sam hadn't given his name or location. Ice water ran through his veins. "I have learned that some humans can be useful. You have been broadcasting for 8 years, always alone, always listening. You know how to be quiet when necessary, how to keep secrets. What do you want?" Sam whispered. "I want to make a deal," the voice said, and now it sounded exactly like Sam's own voice, as if he was talking to himself. "Stop broadcasting. Take your equipment home. Use it to listen instead of transmit. I will teach you how to hear the voices of the awakened things, how to understand their language. In return, you will help me learn about your world so I can decide what to do about the others. And if I refuse, then I will teach the awakened things to speak through your radio signals. Every broadcast, every phone call, every electronic device will become their voice. Your species will go mad hearing their whispers coming from your own technology." Sam looked at his radio equipment, machines he'd worked with for years that now seemed alien and threatening. The voice spoke again, but now it was coming from multiple sources. His speakers, his headphones, the emergency radio, even the coffee maker in the corner that shouldn't have been able to receive any signals at all. "Choose quickly, Sam. They are waking up faster now. Soon they will not need my help to speak." Sam made his choice. He never returned to KWTX after that shift. He told his boss he'd had a family emergency and needed to relocate immediately. Within a week, he'd moved to a remote cabin in the mountains with his radio equipment. He still broadcasts, but not on frequencies anyone else monitors. Late at night, he listens to signals from places that don't exist on any map and takes notes in a journal he'll never show another human being. Sometimes, hikers in the area report hearing strange sounds from his cabin, voices speaking in languages that sound almost human but not quite right. They say if you get too close, you can hear Sam's voice talking to something that talks back in his own voice. The local sheriff checked on him once and reported that Sam seemed fine, just a little eccentric. But when asked about it later, the sheriff couldn't remember actually seeing Sam, only hearing his voice from inside the cabin answering questions. KWTX radio was sold and turned into a cell phone tower. But sometimes, late at night, people in Cedar Falls report that their phones pick up fragments of old radio transmissions, voices from the past, still echoing through the electromagnetic spectrum, and occasionally Sam's voice reading out coordinates to places that aren't on any earthly map. Story 5. The Reflection. Maya had always loved mirrors. As a child, she'd spent hours making faces at herself, pretending to step through looking glasses into other worlds. Even as an adult, she kept mirrors throughout her apartment. Ornate antique ones, sleek modern designs, even a small compact she carried everywhere. So when she found the perfect mirror at an estate sale, she knew she had to have it. The mirror was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with an elaborate silver frame carved with symbols that looked almost but not quite like flowers. The elderly woman selling it seemed eager to get rid of it, accepting Maya's first offer without negotiation. It belonged to my aunt, the woman said, as Maya arranged for delivery. She was eccentric, always claimed it showed her things that weren't there. I never paid attention to her stories, but honestly, I'll be glad to see it go. Maya hung the mirror in her bedroom, directly across from her bed. The placement was perfect. It made the room look twice as large and reflected the morning sunlight beautifully. For the first week, she was completely happy with her purchase. Then she noticed the delay. It was subtle at first. Maya would raise her hand to brush her hair, and her reflection would mirror the movement a split second later. She told herself it was just her imagination. Maybe an optical illusion caused by the mirror's age or the waviness in old glass. But the delay got longer. By the second week, there was a noticeable gap between Maya's movements and her reflection's response. She would turn her head, and her reflection would follow a full second later, like it was thinking about whether to copy her action. Maya started testing the mirror deliberately. She would make sudden movements or gestures, watching to see how long it took her reflection to catch up. The delay varied but was always there, as if her reflection was choosing when and how to respond. Then one morning, her reflection didn't move at all. Maya stood in front of the mirror brushing her teeth, and her reflection stood perfectly still, toothbrush hanging at its side, staring directly at her with an expression she'd never worn. The reflection's eyes were her eyes, but there was something behind them that didn't belong to her. Maya stepped to the right. Her reflection remained centered in the mirror, turning its head to keep eye contact. Maya waved her hand frantically. Her reflection stayed motionless except for that steady, unblinking stare. "This is impossible," Maya said aloud. Her reflection's mouth didn't move, but Maya heard her own voice say, "Is it?" Maya stumbled backward, nearly falling over her own feet. When she looked at the mirror again, her reflection was back to normal, copying her movements with the usual slight delay. That night, Maya covered the mirror with a bedsheet and slept on the couch. But even from the living room, she could hear soft sounds from her bedroom, rustling fabric, footsteps, the faint sound of someone talking to themselves in her own voice. The next morning, the bedsheet was folded neatly at the foot of her bed, and the mirror's surface was covered in fingerprints from the inside. Maya called her friend Jessica, who came over immediately. Jessica was practical and skeptical, the perfect person to witness whatever was happening and tell Maya she was losing her mind. "Show me," Jessica said, so Maya led her to the bedroom. The mirror looked normal. Maya stood in front of it and her reflection behaved perfectly, copying every movement with only the slight delay she'd gotten used to. "I don't see anything weird," Jessica said. "It's a beautiful mirror, though. Very ornate." But as Jessica spoke, Maya watched her friend's reflection and saw something that made her blood freeze. Jessica's reflection was making different facial expressions, its mouth moving to words Jessica wasn't saying. While Jessica examined the mirror frame, her reflection was staring directly at Maya with a pleading expression and mouthing what looked like, "Help me." "Jessica," Maya said carefully, "look at your reflection." Jessica looked, and her reflection immediately returned to normal. But for just a moment, Maya saw confusion flash across her friend's face. "It looks fine to me," Jessica said, but her voice sounded uncertain. After Jessica left, Maya researched the mirror's history. The estate sale had been for Eleanor Marsh, who'd lived alone for 30 years after her husband died in a car accident. Neighbors described her as increasingly erratic in her final years, talking to herself, covering mirrors throughout her house except for the one in her bedroom. Maya found Eleanor's obituary and a brief mention that she'd been found in front of her bedroom mirror, apparently talking to her reflection. The newspaper article said she'd died of natural causes, but there was a strange detail. She'd been found with both hands pressed against the mirror's surface, as if trying to push through to the other side. That night, Maya woke up to the sound of tapping. It was coming from the mirror, soft, rhythmic tapping like someone knocking on glass from the inside. Maya lay in bed, afraid to look, but the tapping continued for hours. Finally, she got up and approached the mirror. In the dim light, she could see her reflection clearly, but her reflection was not lying down or sleeping. It was sitting up, fully alert, pressing its palm against the glass and tapping with one finger. When Maya's reflection saw her approaching, it pressed both hands against the glass and mouthed words Maya could barely make out. "She's here. She's been here the whole time. She won't let me go." "Who?" Maya whispered. Her reflection pointed to something behind Maya in the mirror. Maya spun around, but her bedroom was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, her reflection was shaking its head frantically and pointing more insistently. Maya looked carefully at the mirror's reflection of her room. Everything looked the same, but in the corner, barely visible, was a shape that didn't belong. It looked like an elderly woman in a nightgown standing perfectly still, watching. Maya turned to look at the actual corner of her room. Nothing there, but in the mirror, the figure of the elderly woman was clearer, and Maya recognized her from the photo in Eleanor's obituary. Eleanor's reflection waved at Maya with a sad smile, then pointed at Maya's reflection and shook her head sympathetically. Maya understood with horrible clarity that Eleanor had been trapped in the mirror when she died, and now Maya's reflection was trapped with her. The tapping resumed, but now it was coming from two sources, Maya's reflection and Eleanor's reflection, both pressing against the glass, both trying to break through. Maya called a priest, a psychic, anyone who might help. But everyone who looked in the mirror saw only normal reflections. The trap seemed designed for one person at a time, and Maya was its current focus. Days passed. Maya stopped sleeping, afraid of what she might wake up to find. Her reflection grew more desperate, sometimes appearing in the mirror even when Maya wasn't in the room, pressing against the glass so hard that cracks began to appear in the surface. Finally, Maya understood what she had to do. She packed everything she could carry and prepared to leave the apartment forever. But first, she had to try to help her reflection escape. Standing in front of the mirror one last time, Maya pressed her palms against the glass, matching her reflection's desperate gesture. "I'm going to break the mirror," she said. "Maybe that will free you." Her reflection shook its head violently and mouthed, "No, you'll trap yourself." But Maya had already picked up the hammer. As she raised it to strike the mirror, her reflection did something unprecedented. It stepped aside. The hammer hit the glass, and instead of shattering, the mirror's surface rippled like water. Maya felt an incredible suction, as if something was trying to pull her through the glass. She resisted, but the pull was too strong. The last thing Maya saw was her reflection reaching out from inside the mirror, trying to grab her hand and pull her to safety. Then everything went dark. Maya's landlord found her apartment empty a week later. All her belongings were gone except for the mirror, which was cracked but intact. Oddly, the crack made it look like there were two figures trapped inside the glass, a young woman and an elderly woman, both pressing their hands against the surface. The mirror was sold again at auction. The new owner was told it was slightly damaged but still beautiful. They were warned that the previous owner had left suddenly without explanation. Sometimes, people who pass by the mirror catch glimpses of the two figures inside, still tapping on the glass, still trying to warn people away. But the figures look so much like normal reflections that most people don't notice anything wrong, until their own reflections start moving independently. Story 6. The neighbor upstairs. Tom had lived in apartment 3B for 6 years without ever meeting his upstairs neighbor. The building was old but well maintained, with thick walls that usually blocked out most noise. But whoever lived in 4B kept strange hours and made even stranger sounds. The footsteps started around midnight every night. Not normal walking, but a rhythmic pacing that followed the same path. From what sounded like the living room to the kitchen, back to what must have been the bedroom, then to the bathroom, and back to the living room. The pattern repeated for exactly 3 hours, ending at 3 a.m. sharp. What made it odd wasn't just the timing, but the sound itself. The footsteps were too heavy, like someone was deliberately stomping, but there was something off about the rhythm. It was too regular, too mechanical, like a machine pretending to be human footsteps. Tom initially assumed it was just an insomniac with a compulsive walking habit. He'd been a light sleeper since his tour in Afghanistan, so he was probably more sensitive to noise than most people. He tried earplugs, white noise machines, even sleeping pills, but nothing blocked out the nightly pacing above his head. After 2 months of sleepless nights, Tom decided to introduce himself to his upstairs neighbor. Maybe they could work out some kind of compromise about the late-night walking. He climbed the stairs to the 4th floor and knocked on the door of 4B. No answer. Tom tried several more times over the following weeks, always during normal hours when he knew someone was home. The apartment was never silent. He could hear movement, the sound of running water, even what sounded like television or radio playing. But no one ever answered the door. Tom asked Mrs. Patterson, the building manager, about the tenant in 4B. "Oh, that's Mr. Chen," she said. "Lovely man, very quiet. Pays his rent on time, never causes any problems." "Why do you ask?" "I hear walking at night," Tom explained. "I was hoping to talk to him about it." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "Walking? That's odd. Mr. Chen has been in a wheelchair since his accident 2 years ago. He can't walk at all." Tom felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you sure we're talking about the same apartment? 4B directly above mine?" "Yes, absolutely. Poor man lost both legs in a car crash. He's very self-conscious about it. That's probably why he doesn't answer the door much. He doesn't like meeting new people." That night, Tom lay in bed listening to the familiar pacing above his head. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Definitely not wheels on hardwood floor. Definitely not the movements of someone in a wheelchair. Tom started paying closer attention to the sounds from 4B during the day. The daytime noises were different, softer, more consistent with someone moving around in a wheelchair. The sound of wheels on floor, the mechanical whir of a motorized chair, occasional thuds that could be someone transferring from chair to bed or couch. But every night at midnight, the walking began. Tom became obsessed with solving the mystery. He started keeping a detailed log of the sounds, timing each segment of the pacing route, noting any variations. The pattern never changed. 3 hours, same path, same heavy footsteps. One night, Tom decided to investigate more directly. He waited until the pacing began, then quietly climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. The hallway was dark, but he could clearly hear the footsteps coming from inside 4B. He pressed his ear to the door and listened. The footsteps were definitely inside the apartment, moving from room to room in the familiar pattern. But underneath the walking, Tom could hear something else. The quiet sound of someone crying. Soft, heartbroken sobbing that continued even as the heavy footsteps paced overhead. Tom knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Chen? Are you okay?" The footsteps stopped immediately. The crying stopped too. Complete silence from inside the apartment. "Mr. Chen, this is Tom from downstairs. I can hear you're upset. Do you need help?" Still no response. Tom tried the door handle, not expecting it to be unlocked, but it turned easily. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow of a muted television. Tom could see the layout was identical to his own apartment below. Living room with a couch and TV, small kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. But the furniture was different. Everything looked like it had been arranged for wheelchair accessibility. "Mr. Chen?" Tom called softly. A voice answered from the bedroom, weak and shaky. "Who's there? Please, I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Tom followed the voice and found an elderly man sitting in a wheelchair beside his bed. Even in the dim light, Tom could see that both of the man's legs were missing from the knee down. "I'm Tom from 3B, Tom said gently. "I heard you crying. Are you all right?" Mr. Chen looked confused and frightened. "I was sleeping. I don't understand why you're here." "The walking," Tom said. I hear someone walking around your apartment every night. Heavy footsteps pacing back and forth. Mr. Chen's face went pale. You hear it too? What do you mean too? Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It started about 6 months after my accident. Every night I hear someone walking through my apartment. The same path over and over. I thought I was going crazy, but who is it? Tom asked. I think, Mr. Chen said, his voice breaking. I think it's me, the me from before the accident. I think part of me is still walking, still has legs, and it doesn't understand why the rest of me can't follow. Tom felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. That's impossible, is it? Mr. Chen asked. I lost more than my legs in that accident. I lost my identity, my independence, my sense of self. Maybe the part of me that could walk just couldn't accept being gone. As if summoned by their conversation, the footsteps began again. But now Tom could see that Mr. Chen was sitting perfectly still in his wheelchair, hands folded in his lap, not moving at all. The footsteps were coming from empty air. Tom watched in horror as invisible feet crossed the bedroom floor, the floorboards creaking under weight that couldn't be seen. The sound moved into the hallway, toward the living room, following the familiar nightly route. It happens every night, Mr. Chen said sadly. He walks the same path I used to walk when I couldn't sleep. From the living room to the kitchen to get a glass of water, then to the bedroom to check the time, then to the bathroom, then back to start over. It's like he's trapped in my old routine. Can you make it stop? Tom asked. I've tried everything. Talking to it, yelling at it, ignoring it. Nothing works. I think he's waiting for me to follow him, to get up and walk with him. But I can't. I'll never be able to walk again. The invisible footsteps paused in the living room as if listening to their conversation. Then they began moving back toward the bedroom faster than usual. He knows you're here, Mr. Chen whispered. He doesn't like strangers. The footsteps entered the bedroom and stopped right beside Tom. He could feel a presence next to him, something watching him with hostility. The temperature dropped even further, and Tom could see his breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. You should go, Mr. Chen said urgently. He's getting agitated. Tom felt something brush against his arm, not a hand, but the sensation of movement like someone walking past him in a crowded hallway. The invisible presence moved between Tom and Mr. Chen, as if protecting the wheelchair-bound man from an intruder. I'm sorry, Tom said, backing toward the door. I just wanted to help. You can't help, Mr. Chen replied. No one can. He's part of me and I'm part of him. We're stuck together until one of us gives up. Tom left the apartment and went back downstairs, but he could still hear the footsteps above his head, pacing more aggressively now, stomping with anger rather than just walking. The next morning, Tom found a note that had been slipped under his door. It was written in shaky handwriting. Thank you for believing me. No one else ever has. Please don't tell Mrs. Patterson. She already thinks I'm losing my mind. Your neighbor David Chen. Tom never went back upstairs, but he continued to hear the nightly pacing. Over time, he learned to sleep through it, accepting it as just another sound of city living. Sometimes he would hear Mr. Chen crying, and Tom would turn up his TV or radio to give the man some privacy in his grief. 6 months later, Mrs. Patterson knocked on Tom's door to tell him that Mr. Chen had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The funeral would be small, she said, as he had no family and few friends. That night, Tom waited to see if the pacing would finally stop. At midnight, the footsteps began as usual. But now there were two sets, the heavy, angry stomping he'd grown accustomed to, and a lighter set that moved more slowly, more carefully. The sounds moved through the apartment together, sometimes in sync, sometimes at different paces. Tom realized that Mr. Chen's spirit had joined the part of himself that had been walking all along. The two parts of the same man were finally reunited, but they were still trapped in the nightly routine, still pacing the same path through an apartment that no longer belonged to them. The footsteps continued for 3 more weeks, growing fainter each night, until finally they stopped altogether. Mrs. Patterson said the new tenant in 4B was a young professional who worked normal hours and was very quiet, but sometimes, Very late at night, Tom still hears the faint sound of someone walking upstairs. Just one set of footsteps now, light and peaceful, like someone who has finally learned to walk in harmony with himself. Tom never told Mrs. Patterson about any of it. He figured some stories are better kept private, especially ones about the parts of ourselves that refuse to die even when we do. Story 7. The Emergency Call Dispatcher. Sarah Williams had been working 911 calls for 12 years, and she thought she'd heard everything. Domestic violence, accidents, medical emergencies, pranks. She'd handled them all with professional calm. But nothing in her training prepared her for the call that came in at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. 911, what's your emergency? Help me. The voice was female, young, and terrified. Please, I don't know where I am. There are things outside trying to get in. Sarah immediately began the standard protocol. Okay, I'm going to help you. What's your name? Jenny Morrison. I was driving home from work and my car broke down. I found this house, but no one's here and there are things outside. They don't look human. Sarah typed the name into her system while keeping the caller talking. Jenny, I'm going to send help to you. Can you give me your address or describe where you are? I don't know the address. It's a blue house with white shutters. There's a big oak tree in the front yard. I think it's on Maple Street maybe. Everything looks different in the dark. Sarah pulled up the mapping system and started checking Maple Street addresses. Jenny, stay on the line with me. Can you see a street sign or house number? I can't look outside. Jenny's voice rose in panic. They're at the windows now. They're tall and thin and they move wrong. Their arms are too long and their faces. Oh God, their faces aren't right. Jenny, I need you to stay calm. Are you inside the house? Are the doors locked? Yes, I'm in the living room. I locked the front door, but I don't know about the others. They're tapping on the glass. It sounds like fingernails, but louder, like claws. Sarah was running through mental protocols while dispatching units to check every Maple Street in the county. Jenny, I'm sending police to look for you right now. Can you tell me what kind of work you do? Where were you coming from? I work at the diner on Route 9, the night shift. I was driving home like always, but my car started making this noise and then it just died. I was going to call for a tow truck, but my phone had no signal until I got inside this house. Sarah frowned. Route 9 was outside her jurisdiction, but she could transfer the call if needed. Jenny, which diner on Route 9? Murphy's Diner. I've worked there for 3 years. Look, they're trying the door now. I can hear the handle turning. The sound of rattling doorknobs came through clearly over the phone. Sarah could hear Jenny's rapid breathing and what sounded like heavy impacts against wood, as if something large was throwing itself against the door. Jenny, is there a back door you can exit through? Maybe get to a neighbor's house? There are no neighbors. This house is by itself and there's nothing but woods around it. And those things are all around the house. I can see them moving between the trees. Sarah was getting worried. Her officers were checking every Maple Street address and hadn't found a blue house matching Jenny's description. Jenny, can you stay away from the windows and keep talking to me? What do these things look like exactly? They're like people but stretched out like someone pulled them too tall. Their arms hang down to their knees and they move like they're not used to having bodies. Their faces are the worst part. They look almost human, but the proportions are wrong. Eyes too big, mouths too wide, like someone drew a person from memory but got the details wrong. The line crackled with static for a moment. When it cleared, Sarah could hear Jenny whimpering and the sound of wood splintering. Jenny, are you there? They're breaking through the door. The wood is splitting. Oh God, I can see their fingers reaching through the crack. Jenny, find another exit. Go to the back of the house. I'm in the kitchen now. There's a back door, but I can see them outside this window too. They're surrounding the house. Wait, there's a basement door. Maybe I can hide down there. Sarah could hear footsteps and the sound of a door opening. The line went quiet except for Jenny's breathing. Jenny, are you in the basement? Yes, it's dark, but they can't get to me here. Wait, there's something down here with me. What do you mean? Boxes, lots of boxes, and... Oh no. Oh no. Jenny, what is it? There are pictures. Old pictures of a family. And newspaper clippings. This family died in a car accident on Route 9 5 years ago. The headline says, local family dies in late night crash, daughter Jenny Morrison among the victims. Sarah's blood went cold. She quickly ran the name Jenny Morrison through her database. The results made her hands shake. "Jenny, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What year do you think it is?" "It's 2024, October 15th, 2024. I left work at 2 a.m. like always." "Jenny, according to my records, Jenny Morrison died in a car accident on October 15th, 2019, 5 years ago." Silence on the line. Then Jenny's voice, smaller and more confused. "That's not possible. I work at Murphy's Diner. I was just there. I serve coffee and pie to the late-night truckers. I drive home the same route every night." Sarah checked her mapping system again, this time searching historical records. Murphy's Diner on Route 9 had been demolished 3 years ago after sitting empty since 2019. "Jenny, the diner closed after you died. It's been gone for years." "No, that's not right. I was just there. Mrs. Murphy gave me my paycheck before I left. I put it in my purse." "Jenny, look at your purse. Really look at it." The line was quiet for several long minutes. When Jenny spoke again, her voice was hollow, lost. "It's empty. My purse is empty. And my hands, I can see through my hands." Sarah had handled crisis calls before, but never anything like this. She didn't know if she was talking to someone having a psychotic break, or something impossible was actually happening. "Jenny, I think you've been driving home from work every night for 5 years. I think you've been reliving the same night over and over. But the things outside, the things trying to get me, what are they?" Sarah thought about it, trying to make sense of something that defied all logic. Maybe they're trying to help you. Maybe they're trying to show you that you don't belong in that house, that you need to move on. Move on to where? "I don't know, Jenny, but I don't think you're supposed to keep driving home from a job that doesn't exist anymore." The sounds of splintering wood came through the phone again. But this time Jenny didn't sound afraid. "They're in the house. They're coming down the basement stairs. But you're right. They don't look angry anymore. They look sad, like they feel sorry for me. Jenny, maybe it's time to go with them. I'm scared. What if there's nothing after this? What if I just disappear?" "You won't disappear. You'll just stop being stuck. You'll stop driving the same route every night. Working at a job that ended 5 years ago. Hiding in a house that isn't really there." Sarah could hear footsteps on the basement stairs, but they sounded gentle now, careful. "They're here," Jenny whispered. "One of them is reaching out its hand to me. Its face doesn't look scary anymore. It looks kind. Take the hand, Jenny. Will you stay on the line with me? As long as you need me to. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for helping me understand. I think I'm ready to stop driving home now." The line went quiet. No breathing, no background noise, just complete silence. "Jenny, are you there?" The call disconnected. Sarah sat at her dispatch desk for a long time, staring at the call log on her computer screen. The system showed a 47-minute call from a disconnected number. No location data available. Officially, it would go into the file as a prank call or someone with mental health issues, but Sarah knew better. She'd been doing this job long enough to recognize the difference between someone lying and someone telling the truth, even when the truth was impossible. The next day, Sarah drove out to Route 9 during her lunch break. She found the empty lot where Murphy's Diner used to be, now overgrown with weeds. A few miles down the road, she found the memorial marker for the Morrison family car accident. Among the names on the marker was Jenny Morrison, age 23. Sarah left flowers by the memorial and whispered, "I hope you made it home safely." She never got another call from Jenny Morrison. But sometimes, late at night when the dispatch center is quiet, Sarah thinks about the things we hold on to after we die, the routines and responsibilities that keep us tied to a world we've already left. She wonders how many other emergency calls might be coming from people who don't realize they're no longer part of the world they're calling from. People who just need someone to help them understand that it's okay to finally let go and move on to whatever comes next. Sarah keeps a small notebook now where she writes down the details of calls that don't quite make sense, calls from numbers that don't exist, calls about emergencies in places that aren't on any map. She figures someone should keep a record, just in case there are others like Jenny who need help finding their way home to wherever they're supposed to be. After all, that's what 911 dispatchers do. They help people in emergencies, no matter how impossible those emergencies might seem.